Hello, Goodness. Welcome back to the Gooner Pavilion. And wow, it's been a while, few weeks, hasn't it? We've talked Noni Madueke. We've debated whether 52 million is genius or madness. But today, let's talk about the big elephant in the Arsenal transfer room, Victor Gyökeres. Everywhere you turn, Gooners are asking the same thing. Why is this deal taking so long? Right. And honestly, I've been having this exact same debate with my friend yesterday. And he was saying if Arsenal can spend 52 million on Madueke, why can't they just pay Gyökeres clause and get it done? And my counter was transfers aren't just about the price tag, it's wages, agent fees, player demands, it all adds up, right? And we went back and forth, about releases clauses, and I'm gonna bring you a little bit into that conversation today. Because as we're arguing about it, I thought to myself, I need to go and do a bit more research about release clauses. So I did that, and I'm going to just share with you on this podcast some of the reasons why potentially this Gyökeres deal is taking as long as it is, and I'm going to embrace all the questions and all the frustrations that Gunners are facing right now, and what are the alternatives for Arsenal if Gyökeres doesn't happen. So let's unpack it all. Okay, guys, let's start with the basics, right? I'm sure, a lot of you who following this transfer would be aware of this, but for those who are just seeing this for the first time, let's just go to the very beginning. So Victor Gyökeres is a former Coventry striker. So he has played in the English league in the past. He's now a Sporting in Portugal, and is coming off an insane season. 43 goals in all competitions for Sporting. He's a pressing monster, physical presence, relentless runner. His release clause reportedly around 100 million euros. That's roughly about 85 million pounds, right? And my friend was saying, just pay it, right? If you want a top striker, don't mess about. Um, but it's not that simple, right? So I didn't know this, and I just found, out that in Portugal, it doesn't really work like that. So if Arsenal formally trigger the clause, they will need to pay the full 100 million upfront into the league. No installments, no negotiations. And it makes sense, right? That's why clubs often try to negotiate a fee close to the clause, right? Instead of activating directly, because paying it outright would blow Arsenal's summer transfer budget in one swoop. That would leave little room for other signings. And maybe that's why some of this other signings are happening a lot more quicker because of the structure of the payments. Now, Gyökeres' agent, Hassan Setinkaya, has a reputation for tough negotiations. And reports in Portugal say that Gyökeres' wages, um, he wants to match top Premier League forwards. And that's well over 200K a week, right? So it's not just pay the cost, it's a ripple effect, through the entire wage structure for Arsenal. But I also get the fear among fans because does when we were talking yesterday, he also said if we wait too long, someone else could swoop in. And that's the real risk, right? People bring up the Mudryk saga. Arsenal courted him for months, only for Chelsea to hijack it at the very last minute. But let's be honest, Mudryk hasn't set the wall all right. Trust that who we sign instead has arguably been a better piece of business, right? So sometimes patience works out. Even, Charles Watts, I was listening to his podcast Inside Arsenal. He was saying that Arsenal will spend big if the right player emerges, but they're determined not to be held hostage by massive release clauses. And I get it. And that's probably wise business, which I know for fans it is really frustrating because it's not about business for us. We just want our clubs to be in the best position the start of the season. And for those of you who are not aware, Arsenal have a very daunting start to the 2025 Premier League, with games against all the top four teams. So we need to start well and we need to start fast. So Gyökeres or whoever it is the striker is need to happen as soon as possible. And my friend was adamant, right? You've already dropped 52 million on Mudryk. Why not spend a little bit more for Gyökeres? But I think that's where the conversation, gets a little bit real because Madueke might be cheaper overall because lower wages than Gyökeres, possibly lower agent fees. We can't discount all of this. And there is no giant release clause to pay upfront. So while 50 to 52 million feels big, the total package cost of Madueke might be far less than the 85 million plus Gyökeres deal will look like. And that's important because Arsenal have other areas to strengthen. So speaking about other areas to strengthen, in my podcast, previous podcast, I talked about some of the potential targets that Arsenal have got in the defensive position as well, because I expect one or two exits to happen. But up front, alternatives to Gyökeres. So if Arsenal decide that Gyökeres is too rich for their blood, who else is out there? And I mean, we've talked about some of them in the past, right? Benjamin Sesko, tall, mobile. I know people are saying that Arsenal has left that deal, but we all know what happens in the transfer window. Anything can happen. Deals that could be off, could be back on, could be off again. So and the reports say that his release clause is about 65 million, about 55 million. Arsenal like him, but I know Leipzig, want a heck of a lot more money because he's 21. But then again, there's Manchester United and also Chelsea who are monitoring the situation as well. I know you've got Ollie Watkins, right? He had an incredible 2023-24, scoring 27 goals in all competitions. Now, last season, there was a little bit of a drop off, but that was because you had John Duran, that's it, John Duran, was also there, and Unai Emery. Um, I don't know whether it was a case of him trying to stamp his authority or try to transition the club into the sort of players that he wants. But we all know Ollie Watkins wasn't playing regularly. And there were credible reports in January that he was offered to Arsenal, although no deal materialized. Watkins would be costly. I'll probably say about 75, 80 million minimum, but it really depends on what Aston Villa do if they're able to get some signings in. But at least he's proven in the Premier League, right? Then there's Victor Osimhen, and people have said, why don't Arsenal go for him? He's a brilliant player, but let's be honest, right? Probably not realistic. Napoli want over 100 million for him, plus his wages are going to be substantial. We're talking about above 250,000 a week. So Arsenal have shown no concrete movement. And if I'm honest, I cannot see him in an Arsenal shirt just because of the profile. And I don't know if he's the kind of player that Mikel Arteta, tends to gravitate to. So despite the rumors, just don't see that happening. And there's a bit one left wing, even Ferguson. But again, that's a project, right? That's someone that's still very raw and, may have a bright future. But I think for what Arsenal is looking for quite right now, I'm not quite sure he hits that nail right there. So even David Ornstein, he was talking in the Athletic and he was saying that I know that Arsenal have, multiple striker options, but Gyökeres remains a top target. And I feel, confident that that deal would happen as long as the price doesn't become, ridiculous. But I think that camera heads are going to prevail. Gyökeres has already said that he's not going to attend, preseason or report to Sporting Lisbon, and I don't know what that means contractually, whether Sporting would not have to pay him any wages, as a result of that. But I think when you have a player like that, who's probably popular in the dressing room, you're probably doing more harm than good than keeping that player around. So I feel that, this is probably going to happen. And listen, it's not an easy market, right? Elite strikers cost big money. And it's probably the reason why, people are not signing elite strikers here and there just because they just don't exist. So I mean, that conversation was really, really interesting, but it does bring into context, what a lot of us Arsenal fans are feeling right now with regards Gyökeres or with regards Arsenal striker search. And my honest verdict, I love Victor Gyökeres as a player. I think from what I have seen of him, and I can admit to have been following him all of this time up until now, but we've done our research, we watched a couple of games, and he's strong. He presses like a demon. He will give Arsenal a real focal point up front, and he's got the ability to score goals from nothing as well. But at 85 million plus, huge wages, it's a massive financial swing, right? And listen, I know there's a debate about whether Arsenal even need a traditional number nine. Because last season, Ateta tried all sorts of solutions. Havertz played false nine. Martinelli was moved centrally at time. Even Mikel Merino had to fill it as a striker. But let's be honest, that approach fell short when the pressure was on. Remember what happened in Champions League? We fell away in the title race. We look blunt at crucial moments. In the Premier League, you can't afford to compete without someone who's a reliable 20 goal threat. Not unless everyone else chips in consistently. And our first run for the title, that first season, that was what was happening. Everybody was chipping in, and we scored a ridiculous amount of goals. But then last season, injuries and a patchy form killed us in that department. That's why I think Arsenal need to solve the striker problem now. Whether it's Gyökeres, whether it's Sesko, or even someone like Watkins, it can be another season relying on a false nine gamble. And honestly, this debate with my friend has been stuck in my head, right, for the last couple of hours. So I'd love to throw it to you guys. Whose side are you on? Are you on my friend's side who says Arsenal should just pay the clause and get Gyökeres? Or me thinking it's more complicated financially, but also knowing we have to address the striker problem this summer. Drop your take in the comments section, and let's settle this once and for all. And listen, right, when it comes to Arsenal, just to look at where we are right now. So Zubimendi all but done. Well, he's done, right? The announcement is there. Norgaard also done. Um, we hear that Noni Madueke is pretty much done as well. Then there's Mosquera, from Atalanta, centre back, but no progress yet. And then there's Eberechi Eze, was whispers, but I hear Palace wants 60 million minimum. And then this one that, honestly, I just put in the bin, and that's the Gabriel Martinelli rumours of Saudi. But the window is still open, and Arsenal are in Spain now for preseason. Ideally, Arteta wants this squad settled quickly. So, Gunners, I want to hear from you. Do you want Arsenal to pay Gyökeres release clause, or is it too big of a risk? Would you prefer someone like Sesko or Watkins instead? Do you think waiting can hurt us? And whose side are you on in this debate, me or my friend? Drop your thoughts in the comments as well. And let's keep the debate respectful but spicy, because that's what makes, this whole thing fun. And hey, no matter what happens, guys, we'll be here every step of this transfer roller coaster. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Until the next one, come on, you Gunners.